So coming up next, I'll just share my screen again, and this is our agenda. We're coming up into our last panel, Leadership and Chief Diversity Officers, which will be moderated by Bobby Treacy. Bobby, feel free to take away.
Great, thank you, Scott. So on this panel, I will be joined by Mare Heinluth, who is Head of Diversity at Swedbank. Mare, if you could turn on your camera and join us here. Great. I am also joined by Erania Brackett, who is at Dentsply. She's Head of Marketing at Dentsply Sirona. And I am also joined by Sara Lovisolo, who's Head of ESG at Euronext. So it's great to be joined by three very distinguished ladies. I think I'll start there. With so many very distinguished and overachieving, I don't know what's the word, highly achieving ladies here. I think sometimes we get lost in this idea of, oh, they're so high up and they're so far away. And we've spoken today about how if you can't, for a lot of women coming up today, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I'd like to give the opportunity for the panelists to introduce themselves and focus kind of on who they are outside of the office to kind of humanize themselves a little bit more. So we'll start with Erania, if you want to take it away.
Thank you. Thanks again for the invitation to be here. Just listening to the previous panel, really fantastic content there and discussion. So it's really fascinating. Look forward to more of these. As was shared, I currently lead, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for a global dental company called Dentsply Sirona. We provide and manufacture dental equipment end-to-end from imaging, x-ray, implants, crowns, through preventive, and also we're in the clear aligner space as well. So really exciting business that we're in today. Dentistry is becoming digital, and that's also driving very new skill sets for the overall marketing organization. So I would like to say that we're having to be on the cutting edge. Outside of what I do every day, born in the South, I am from Mobile, Alabama, in the United States. And as I shared, the shoes that I wear are either heels for work, tennis shoes for working out, or flip-flops all the rest of the day. So thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much. Sara, if you want to go next.
Yes. Hello everyone, and thanks for me also for the invitation to speak. Thanks to Andreas Hopner for involving me in this very interesting discussion. I'm head of Group ESG for Euronext, which is a group of market infrastructure companies, mostly exchanges from Europe, covering Dublin, Milan, where I sit, Brussels, the Netherlands, Oslo, and we also have a number of other companies that are part of the exchange business value chain, including technology companies and CSDs that are custodians and clearing companies. So a very diverse mix of competencies and also nationalities, just to start discussing diversity. And from a more personal perspective, what I can say about myself is that, I have 4 daughters and still a job. So I think this is already my way of framing success, I would say, and a job that I like a lot. So I think this is the achievement from my perspective, and something that gets me thinking about diversity quite a lot.
Great, thanks a million for that. Just for the record, do you wear slippers or do you wear flip-flops when you walk around the house?
Yeah, I have to say I have a lot of. I try to stay fit, so I try to wear trainers as far as I can.
Okay, great. Mare, if you want to take us away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mare Heinluth. I work as the head of diversity and inclusion in Swedbank, which is one of the biggest banks in Sweden and also the biggest bank in the Baltic countries, so Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And I am based in Tallinn, so Estonian by origin. And to talk a little bit about the company, then it's a universal bank, so we provide all the financial services and products necessary for a person, basically from birth to retirement. Let's put it like that. So we say, or how we talk about our bank is that we are the bank for the many. So therefore, diversity and inclusion is very much integrated into who we are as a company, who we see as our clients. And we are over 200 years old. And also, therefore, we see ourselves as important part of the society, as we are one of the biggest banks and also one of the biggest employers in the Baltic countries in particular. So that's why D&I in one way is really important for us. On a personal note, what do I do outside of work? I spend a lot of time with my friends and family. I love dancing. I love doing some artsy things every now and then. And due to the climate here in Tallinn, currently it's minus 15 degrees Celsius. So actually most of the year I wear boots, like Tank, Doc Martens, whatever. And then before the pandemic, I used to wear heels quite a lot, but now they're just like gathering dust in my closet. Yeah, so that's me.
That's great. For the record, I'm a Crocs man myself. So moving on, I'd like to start actually with Mare. So you're in your role of head of diversity at Swedbank. I'd like to ask, what are the challenges that you face with spreading the message of why diversity is important, and what are some of the major obstacles that you come up with spreading that message?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. Actually, it's gotten easier because I've been doing this. I mean, you can probably tell I'm relatively young, but I started doing this work about 6 years ago now. And when I started, it was harder in the sense that you had to establish a lot of the understanding and really convince and work with the people, and especially the managers that weren't sharing this mindset. But definitely, I mean, the Swedish society is one thing, the Baltic societies are another topic. They're not exactly in the same place. And I definitely see we've come a long way from where we started 6 years ago. But I think what the struggle that remains is just basically the human factor and the continuous human bias that never really goes away, and you need to repeat and repeat and repeat yourself. Even if people in principle understand and share these values, then due to their hectic lives and hectic work situations, they don't always think or consider their own bias in their decision making. So I need to be there to remind and repeat what it is that we want to achieve and why is it so important. So the human factor, I'd say, is what it keeps.
We spoke earlier before this, and you had a great phrase. You said studies have been done, as we've seen with all the panels previous today. Studies have been done, and at this point, it's a matter of education, not a matter of opinion. Women do, or yes, businesses with more diversity do much better. I thought that was just a brilliant soundbite.
Yeah.
I'd like to move to Sara. Are you optimistic about the future? Do you think it would be easier to get more diversity throughout the workforce?
I think you need to think in terms of trajectory. So it's not just important to take a picture of your workforce and count, how many different type of workers you have. The important thing is you have to look at the stories of the various groups you are trying to encourage to stay in your company and to progress their career. Because if you think about, for example, gender diversity and women, then what matters most is that you think in terms of the life cycle. The fact that you can retain people throughout their career and the various stages of their lives. So if you look at a company that attracts a lot of young women, and then perhaps after they have got married or have children, they have to leave, and then you embark more young people and so on. We are not solving the problem. So I think perhaps sometimes we have a problem with the figures, with our our way of measuring the ability of organizations to have a real impact, because it's very important that we try and track our ability as a society and as a single company to make sure that people can express the diversity, the specific values throughout their lifetime. So I think women are now attending scientific specialization at universities, so you can start seeing when women joining companies are as analysts, as electronic engineers, and so on, which is great. The important thing is how are we able to retain them over the long run. And so while I'm optimistic about the entry level and the fact that we are making our workforce more diverse, I'm not sure we have still this ability to offer diverse groups careers for the long run. So I think we have to do more work on this in this area.
Okay. So specifically talking then about the longer life cycle, so we're generally optimistic about the entry level positions, but we see that diversity tapers off the longer a career goes on. Erania, I want to ask you specifically to your industry, what specific strategies do you think could be used to maybe combat this and increase gender diversity within your specific industry?
Sure. As I mentioned, I work in the dental industry, and hopefully most of us have a relationship with a dentist of some sort. Really, dentists touch, much like physicians, it's important that your dentist represents, the makeup of the community, so that, all members of the community feel comfortable going there in an already kind of tough situation if you have to go in for not so great reasons. When it comes to dentistry, working for, one of the largest dental equipment and consumables provider, we actually have a really big role to play. And I'm really happy to say that the company prior to me joining has been doing a lot of that. Recognizing that in this industry, and I guess in many others, kind of what are the mega trends, what's happening in the industry, and what we see happening in dentistry specifically is that not only is it becoming digital, which I think is fantastic, but it's also becoming more heavily women driven. If you look around the world at dental schools, more than 50% of that population and greater is female. And we have to really understand how do we make sure that we are understanding this, digesting this, and really catering to those the up and coming generation of women, future dental leaders. I can get into it in later questions, but we are doing a lot here to ensure that women have a prominent place in dentistry. So within this group, from a healthcare, any of you that are in the healthcare industry, you know that the role of the clinician, whether you're in medical device or certainly dentistry, is really very important in the role that they play, because really kind of, I'd say from a peer-to-peer standpoint, dentist to dentist or physician to physician, is very important that those perspectives are shared on any products that are coming to market. And so we want to make sure that women have a prominent place as influencers in the dental industry. And so we've established a number of programs to ensure that we're educating, training, and developing women to be those main stage speakers and really important KOLs that we're elevating to the global, to the global level in many cases. So industry by industry, we have a role to play. If we understand the market dynamics and the shift in demographics, we've got certainly here great programs in place to elevate women over time.
Great, thanks, Millie, for your perspective on that. Mare, I was wondering, do you have any other challenges that you think, apart from just the tapering off later on in their career, do you think there's any other specific challenges that hinder diversity, and what specific strategies do you recommend to combat those?
Yeah, for certain there are, and I think it really depends, and it can be different for each and every company depending on the industry they're in, and also the societies and geographically where are they operating. For example, in the Baltic countries, historically, being a, well, who would we call a teller, or your consultant at a bank office? That is historically a very female job. So currently, still 90% of our front line in the Baltic countries is females, is women. And then when you go and look at Sweden, then it is way, way more balanced. It's essentially, you could say it's gender balanced, the frontline position in Sweden. And then we have this, as most of the financial industry globally does, we have a pervasive gender pay gap, because we have a lot of women in the lower paying beginning level jobs. And if you move higher up in the hierarchy of the company to different jobs and different job grades, then you start to see way more men. So it's just an example. If you go to corporate banking or investment banking, then of course you have tons more men. You go to the IT tech side, again, more men. And I think it's a challenge if you are a company of a larger size and you have different types of job that are victims to different types of social stereotypes, on how to work to create balance in each of those smaller parts of the company and those jobs, because it's the overall gender balance, or an overall diverse teams that we're going after, not just pluses and minuses equaling each other out in the end. So that's one of the issues I think that a lot of companies face.
I find that really interesting. So just sticking with that, in Sweden it's more or less, you see a 50-50 balance between men.
More like 40-60, still more female dominated in that particular position, but yes, it's way more balanced.
Yeah. And do you think that is specifically due to the policies of the bank, or do you think that's more to do with culture and geography?
No, those are very far-reaching, long, like societal stereotypes of like what kind of jobs are seen as female jobs, what jobs are male jobs. And again, that can be different in the different cultures and societies across the world. But for example, in the Baltics, education, medicine, customer service, which is like bank consultant position, essentially is customer service. Those are very like female jobs, and men work in other types of industries. So there is this kind of a gender segregation within the society of what's considered normal. And then you have the whole pipeline issue of who even applies for your jobs. You really want to have gender balance and diverse teams, but if like nobody applies, then you have a big task in front of you.
I think we're in a really unique position here that we have a person from Estonia, a person from the United States, and a person from Italy. So we can actually go around and we can ask, do you think that there is something inherent to your culture that would make it so that you would see less diversity in top positions, or do you think your culture is largely egalitarian? I would assume that the Balkans would be more egalitarian than, say, I don't know if we were supposed to have a panelist here from Latin America, which would have been brilliant to see her perspective on this, but unfortunately she is COVID. So I will start with Sara. Do you think that there's something inherent to Italian culture that makes it so that women are not pushed forward into higher positions, or do you think it's more of just a life cycle thing?
From an Italian perspective, there are a number of indicators about about equality that can work much better. For example, something that is very typical of the country is the fact that we have a very balanced rate of university graduates. So university graduates are 50-50, slightly more women, I would say, rather than men. And then it's not so much about a life cycle. It's really the level of employment of women in Italy is really low. So many women don't decide to stay very long in work, and they prefer probably to stay, be at home mom, or not to join the workforce. And this is very typical of very specific to the country, and something that companies can do, I think, is to create the conditions and the role models to make sure that we have more moms that are also working, so that they change the culture and they become role models for the children. And in this way, you develop a culture. It's not just a matter of a culture and role model. Sometimes it's really a matter of infrastructure. So in a country where you have lots of support services for working women, it's easier to stay in work longer, because you have nursery schools, you are supported, and this is sometimes beyond the ability of organizations to intervene. Sometimes organizations are trying to create those infrastructures internally by the creation of creating a creche internally, creating nurseries in the organizations to compensate for the absence of public services in this space. So this is another way that for organizations to make a change, these are really long-term problems. And for an organization like ours that is present in so many countries, and with so many nationalities, we have more than 50 nationalities represented in the organization. It's difficult to find, a common denominator, to find where the problems lie, because countries are so different from one another that it's quite difficult to understand what is the killer solution that can help advance this issue. But from an Italian perspective, I think there are really long-term structural problems to having more women in the workforce.
And you spoke about that a lot of women decide to become stay-at-home mothers, and you said it's so important that we have people who are top executives who are also mothers, so that you can see it and you can be it. I was wondering, you specifically, you mentioned in your introduction that you have 4 kids. and you're very proud of that, and that's a real part of your success as a person. How were there supports for you with that, or how did you deal with that? How did you deal with breaking that mold?
So clearly, there's some of the challenges you face are, on the one hand, a bit of stereotyping, because there people start thinking that you are not interested anymore in advancing in your career because your energies will be devoted to something else. And I think it's very important that you make a statement about your priorities. You shouldn't give that for granted. You shouldn't be annoyed by this. I think it's a fact of life that people have this reaction, and I think you have to demonstrate that you can balance the two things, and that you can cope with the and perhaps even bring a different perspective to your company role, because you have that background and that experience. And sometimes it can be hard if you have role models. It's easier to say, well, I'm sticking with this. I'm not giving up. And for example, that was the case for me, as my mother was had 3 children. She always worked, and but I think in organizations have an unconscious bias. Sometimes it's really not something people, managers, colleagues are conscious about when they react surprised or to that piece of information that you have. Sometimes you're tempted not to say it. Right? I have to say. Sometimes you would like just to avoid the topic because you don't want people to react the way they always react to that. You have to, I think, to negotiate a lot.
I think you touched on something very powerful there, that it's important to have a strong role model in your life that you can follow after. And I want to ask Erania, when you were coming up, did you have a strong role model? Could you maybe talk us through, maybe there's some young women on the call right now, what would be your kind of advice, and could you talk through your story of your career and how you came up, and just to sort of give them insights so they can relate to that?
Sure. I started my career in engineering, so it's kind of early stages. If you as a good foundation, if you don't know exactly what you want to do, go do engineering, you'll be okay. So I started my career as a chemical engineer, and was fortunate enough to work for some pretty major brands as a young person. So I got a good foundation and training. Decided that I wanted to be a leader, people leader, and started going down that track. Working in manufacturing and operations as a woman it was great. It was fantastic. I had no issues with the teams, but it was not a place that I personally wanted to be longer term. I wanted to get in front of the customer and be on the kind of cutting edge side of the business. And so making a transition out of operations was probably one of the biggest and most difficult jumps in my career. But I managed to make a jump and get into a customer facing role with another kind of another big blue company, big blue chip company, and spent time honing my leadership skills and working across multiple roles, living in multiple cities. I probably have got 9, close to 10 cities under my belt after about 17 years into my career. And I think one of the challenges is I've thought about this myself versus others is, did I have to do all that, right? In order to just climb that ladder, but finding that right role, being considered for that right role, getting the right person in leadership to sponsor me to roles really drove a lot of moving around. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I do reflect on, was that all truly necessary in my experience? I think it was invaluable. And then I would say kind of later in my career, as I think about the journey relative to diversity and kind of women and overall gender diversity, I think the role of sponsorship played the strongest role for me, right? And I think folks, and that's kind of a no-brainer, we know the role of sponsorship. In order to get into those big key roles, right, someone really has to sponsor you into the organization. And what I would say in terms of role models, there were role models everywhere. I knew kind of what good looked like, depending on the company that you're in, you know, how you shape yourself. What does an executive look like, depending on where you are. And for some of the big blue companies, there was a lot of diversity. In some cases, there wasn't as much. But I had enough, you know, kind of over the course of my career, and I was fortunate with the companies that I worked for that they were already on the diversity train. Later, though, you can get a lot of training, you can be prepared, but someone has to place you in a seat, right? That has to happen, and people take risks, take bets on you. And what I would say is, for some of the bigger roles that I've sat in, I've had a mix of diversity and folks that are willing to take a bet on me and sponsor me into roles. Early on, there were more African Americans, right? Because you know they could see potential and had roles and would pull me in. I gained different skills, but to get to the C-suite really did take you know, a significant sponsorship, relationship building in new ways, and you know, for folks to take a chance on me to pull me into a seat like this. The benefit that I've seen immediately sitting at this level is for those in the business and the company, they reach out immediately, right? They now can see it in a place where it just hasn't existed before. And I don't show up as the stereotypical C-suite executive, very different. And fortunately, you know, in that sense, you can bring your, you know, authentic self to work, you know, and it is really inspiring and encouraging for people to see that. So I'm not shy about telling my story. I'm not shy about talking about the obstacles where I've had it easy and where I've had it, you know, a little bit difficult. But I would say overall, ascending kind of past a certain point in your career, that middle management point is, you know, the role of sponsorship is can't be underscored. And I would say the last point I'll make here and pass it on is that the environment that we're in today, and some of the discussions on the previous panel, what we've talked about today, societal impact and influences, do help, you know, with advancing the agendas for not only board makeup, but also C-suite makeup and senior leadership makeup. But that's true not only in corporate America, but all across many industries. So being ready and being prepared is also an essential part of being ready and being prepared for that sponsorship, that tap on the shoulder is also really critical as well.
That's great. Thank you. That's really insightful. Mare, if somebody is watching this and they're thinking, I would like to be head of diversity, I want to be a chief diversity officer, how would they arrive at that, and what challenges would you say they should be expecting to stand in their way?
Great question. And I just want to thank Erania for sharing her story. I loved listening to it and really made some mental notes. But how to become head of diversity inclusion? I think first off, you need to have an internal desire to work with something like this. You need to have a strong sense of justice, and you know, it needs to be part of your personality that you don't let injustice slide, or that you just, you know, and sometimes you need to argue with people, or sometimes you need to convince people, and you need to do it in a way that isn't offensive, or it isn't, you know, you're not attacking the other person for disagreeing with you. So I think there are a couple of prerequisites in terms of personality traits that you need. But as far as I know, and certainly I didn't go to any university program to prepare myself for this, or I didn't even study human resources. But this function often is under human resources, and so am I in my company. But I ended up working in human resources, and I was sort of tapped or spotted as having a yeah, let's say natural capability or interest in these topics of fairness, equality, justice, and then I just got the opportunity to start working with it because I was there, and the position became vacant. So sometimes you need to be at the right place at the right time with the right uh, prerequisites, and just of course show up and do the work. And what I would suggest or yeah, say people can do is of course educate yourself about this area, because yes, there are very few like formal courses you can take to prepare yourself. So just learn from any formal or informal source that you can, educate yourself on this, and you know, and don't be afraid to speak out where you see injustice or where you see bias or where you see discrimination. So yeah, I think of course studying things such as human resource management, anything related to social sciences, gender studies, of course, that can prepare you and help you, or also legal, studying law, that comes in handy too. Because you know, at the end of the day, if you lose in the court, then that is bad in many ways if it was due to any of the discrimination grounds. So yeah, I
That's
guess
great.
I guess
That's a really great answer. I see Andreas has just put in the chat that if any questions are welcome from the audience. Absolutely. I just want to ask one last question, and just we'll go around again. I'll start with Mare, and then we'll go Erania and back to Sara. What would you say is the greatest achievement of your career so far?
I was thinking about this, and I decided to go practical instead of like broad, saying, "Oh yeah, we've come such a long way." Uh, a couple of years ago, we wanted to do an employer branding campaign, because yeah, well, we had some trouble hiring diverse people, hiring diverse candidates, because people just wouldn't even apply because there are a lot of stereotypes associated to banking, and people that work in a bank. Oh, they must only wear gray suits and be totally boring people, and you know, people didn't really see themselves working at a bank. So we wanted to show on the outside what are we like on the inside, and we did a employer campaign, branding campaign that turned out particularly well, I must say. And we blasted it all over the media in the country, like on the TV, in the radio, on billboards, wherever. And what we set out being just an employer branding campaign to help us recruit turned out to support our whole brand as a company, and it really brought a lot of positive feedback, like from customers, from our competitors, and also made employees terribly proud because we used our own employees in that commercial and in that campaign, and really told the stories of our people, and what are the different backgrounds from, you know, somebody used to be a uh, a forensic investigator and now is the head of facility. Somebody started out as an intern and now is the CEO of the country branch. So it was a really cool human thing, and I considered that to be one of the coolest things I've ever done.
That's great. Erania, would you like to go next?
It's a big question. You know, I don't think there's so many super great achievements. You know, those that make the top of the list, I'd say. But I would say my achievements outside of like the business results that, you know, I've been able to be a part of great teams and deliver is really in cultivating talent. So, you know, my role as a business leader is to deliver for the company. You know, that's non-negotiable. We have to do that. How you get that work done, right, and with the right teams, as much I have a lot of interest in doing that and doing that well, right? So being a leader, and taking and building diverse teams from all angles, orienting them around, kind of achieving something great, so that when we look back at it, we want to work together again. And I would say one of the biggest achievements was taking on an integration in a large company, and the integration was just in pieces when we got there. We weren't making product, and I came on as the plant manager and global business leader, and in a very short amount of time, we were able to really turn that business around. And I was working for GE Healthcare at the time, so a major entity where things work like clockwork, and taking an integration that was the equivalent of, I would say, a mom and pop shop where there was no process, we didn't have the right talent, there's just so many things that we need to go invest in. And in about 18 months, turning that around and driving a profitable, now globalized business, that sounds fantastic, but the work to get there, and with the team that we had, was just amazing. And you look back at where we spend our time, most of our working lives, we spend a lot of that time working and the other part sleeping. And then you fit your family and friends in between, right? So for the time that you're spending working, it's really important to me that people are getting a lot out of that. And my role as a leader is making sure that I'm facilitating growth on so many levels for the company, but also with that team, and that we're enjoying ourselves as we go through the process. So business turnaround, A+ business turnaround was amazing, but the teams that we built and the relationships that we have subsequent to that are really what I carry with me every day.
Great, thanks for that. Sara, greatest achievement?
But from my perspective, I'm very happy when I get others to do the job, right? So when in the organizations I get the CEO, the top management to jump on an issue and wanting to go further. So this is where I find that my job is making a real difference, because when you're able to mobilize the whole organization around an issue. Sometimes what I do is, I create a framework, this so-called strategy, and then people get it and go beyond. So this is where I think that having a sustainability role still makes a difference, because sometimes people say you don't really need it. The business should take the lead. If the organization is sophisticated, this is going to be completely integrated and spread throughout the business functions. So sometimes I think that if you can provide that element of inspiration to the organization to change their direction of travel, is it worth having a sustainability, somebody taking care of sustainability? And I still think there is some technical element to the work. There's a risk of trivializing the issues, trivializing the topic. So if you can bring that component of, I would say, science to the sustainability topic at hand, I think it's really helpful. But in the end, it's really the business leaders that have the power to make an impact. I think in our role we have an element of expert power, but we need to be able to engage those who have all the levers, whether because they have big teams or because they have big budgets, and can make decisions. So I think where the strategy development process has triggered a big response from the business leaders, this is where I'm really happy.
Okay, so acting almost like the glue, or I don't know, facilitating it's something that wouldn't have happened, it wouldn't have worked between these two teams. You were the glue that stuck them together. That's great. So we have a question from the audience here. It says, we are seeing an awful lot of efforts being made towards diversity, especially towards racial diversity and gender diversity, but not so much in regards to disabilities, LGBT community, age. What are your guys' reactions to this? So we will start with Mare.
Actually, I'm happy to say that we've done quite a lot, both for disabilities and LGBT topics. But what's my impression? I think it's difficult to do everything at once. While we all started up with the gender question, and well, it's not really fixed, is it? And even if you fix it for a while or fix it once, then it's easy to fall back and lose that balance, and things happen if you're not paying attention. So I think there's a lot to juggle, and
Could I
especially
just interject there really quickly? Just could you define what you mean by fix? I think that's just a really interesting idea.
good question. I mean, if you reach balance, for example, if your goal is to have gender balance and you reach it, then actually what can also happen is that you fall out of balance. So and if people and the business leaders are also tackling different sorts of crises, I don't know, like dependent on your industry, COVID, dependent. I mean, the whole supply chain crisis in the world, right? And then, I mean, we've seen during this pandemic that sometimes the D&I initiatives get, are falling off the table. So but I do wish that companies just take the resource to work on the other issues as well, because it is about the resource and the manpower you have behind driving progress as well.
Sara, do you think there is more emphasis being put on racial and gender diversity than there is on age diversity or LGBT communities?
So for me, it's a matter of getting the data. So there are some issues that for which you can source the data and you can demonstrate. So it's very easy to count how many women and men you have. It's very easy to count the age groups. So and this type of the number of nationalities. In other types of diversity are more difficult to statistically capture, but what you do there is you move to let's say more of an input approach than an output and outcome approach. So you say we have created the networks, the gender, the diversity networks in the organizations. We have we have created LGBT groups. We have created, but given this completely, so we have not the right to have visibility on these as an organization. So you need people to take the lead bottom up. This is the only solution you can find in our in Europe because you cannot have no access to the data. There is I think in Europe it's really difficult also to identify what you call racial diversity. It's not a word that can be used. And so you can fall back on the word ethnicity, but this doesn't work either. There's no classification you can use. So a proxy we've been using is the nationality because it's to cater for this idea of cultural diversity, because in the end the diversity, if you want to improve your decision-making process, it's a matter of having different cultures at the table, having open discussions. So this is what you want to achieve. From a justice perspective, which is I think completely different perspective. It's more about the impact of the company on society rather than the other way around. There's I think it's quite difficult to go beyond this bottom-up approach, and so it's quite difficult to demonstrate the impact. So what is you have created all these groups, all these networks, all these events and initiatives. What is the the result on the company, it's difficult to quantify. So perhaps you don't have the perception that these issues are addressed, because in the end you don't have the data. But there's lots of initiatives being taken forward that can be just quantified in terms of initiative more than in terms of bottom line statistics, let's say.
So more of this a philosophy of sort of focus on the process rather than focus on the outcome. Okay.
Yeah, you have to show that the culture of the company is open, and this is what you can achieve more than demonstrating the same results as you can with quantifiable dimensions of diversity.
Erania, I want to put this question to you as well, but I also just want to add, I'm just considering it as well, especially in the United States, there are, I know certain law firms that will only recruit from certain universities. So as well as diversity of gender and race, we also need diversity of universities, of social class, as mentioned in this question here, LGBT communities as well. What's your reaction to this? What are your thoughts on this?
I would agree with both my esteemed panelists and their perspectives, right? How you tackle and what you tackle, picking your battles smartly, right? There's the gender equity and gender diversity that that's easy to see typically. But as we discussed yesterday in preparation, how do you define that anymore? Society is changing faster than I think we can keep up. But it's our responsibility to do the best that we can to keep up. So clearly we're focusing there. There are many coalitions that are out there that are working towards gender equity, parity, certainly pay parity, and I was excited to see that the company that I'm with is a part of this broader coalition. So there is significant effort going there. But as an advocate for all of these other diverse groups, how do you bring those to the forefront? And I would just say in the companies that I've been in, right, you have the affinity groups that sit in the company to make sure that all those groups are seen, they're heard, right? And that you elevate the visibility of all your really rich corporation, right? You're elevating visibility for all the people that are in your corporation to drive more of the norm, to make, many of these groups and distinctions really more the norm than they are the exception. I think that from a leadership standpoint, we've not had a target around disability because there's so many types, right? What do you call, right? There's more work being done to define it. But I do think, like anything else, if you want to see representation, where you have the opportunity to hire, we need to there's systemic things you can do, right? But as an individual, there are things you can also do as well, right? I personally have, all of those elements represented in my own family: LGBTQ, disability, it runs the gamut, and I would bet that many of us do as well. But what can we do personally to drive an impact and a change, and champion? So while there are broader initiatives, we haven't dug deep enough in these other areas, and I think it's a matter of prioritization. And someone taking the bigger swing, and individually kind of driving influence there where you can. It's not enough. It's not enough, but sometimes you have to do what you can while the broader organization works on a bigger problem.
Absolutely. Mare, I just want to end with you. I know we're very close to time here, but just I want to circle back to that question again about what do we really define as I suppose fixed, or what would be set targets. As Sara has said, it can be very difficult to get data on that, and as Erania said, as society changes so quickly, it's very difficult to kind of keep up with these things. So I appreciate it's quite a difficult question. We're nearly out of time, but what would you define as fixed, or what would be the targets that you would hope to see hit in the future?
Well, I guess it's quite a global standard for gender equality to be a target of 60-40 either way, so 60-40 of either gender. And I think, when it comes to gender, like that's the one with the easiest answer. For gender balance, a 60-40 relation, and for pay for equal pay or gender pay gap, of course, 0%. But of course, anything you measure and anything that's like statistics then has some deviation. So I think it's important to be healthy with the targets you set for yourself. Because I recall a time where we set maybe too ambitious targets, and then we got all upset that we didn't reach them and felt discouraged for the whole for the whole effort. But yeah, that is the easiest one. When it comes to the other dimensions, then it's more difficult to say if there even is a universal, okay, this would be the best sort of standard. So maybe I'll leave it at that.
Okay, great answer. Thank you very much to all my panelists. I need to hand it back now. I know I've gone slightly over time, but I want to say thank you very much to Erania, to Sara, and to Mare as well. Thank you guys so much. And Scott, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bobby. We are nearly finished. We just have a few more minutes left. I will now hand it over to Andreas Heupner, who will have our closing statement.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much also to the fantastic panel. I do believe that it's worth following up from this. I think we had some excellent discussions. We have recorded it, so we'll come with sound bites and videos to people to approve. And I think that really will help us to go forward. For instance, as on the panel that I moderated, having SDG linked bonds to actually help to contractually drive gender diversity forward among top executives. I really am very excited about that idea. Think about it that way. If you actually vote against the board for lack of diversity, why would you want to finance a bond for the same company and help them even more than you could probably do with your vote? So in that sense, we'll certainly follow up. Thank you very much, and a big applause to all the moderators, panelists, and everybody who organized this. So thank you very much to Scott, Wendy, Kofi, Shika, Bobby, everybody else involved in the organization. And the material, as said, will be put forward to every speaker to approve, and then also shared on LinkedIn. And if you want to stay in touch, if you haven't done so, please follow ExecuShe on LinkedIn, the main communication, or go to execushe.com and look at the data as you wish. And so thank you very much to everybody. Fantastic event, and delighted and honored to be allowed to share this. Thank you very much. That's it from us. Scott, I think I'll close the call now for everybody.